Hello and welcome. Thank you for your patience. I think CP3 was worth waiting for. What do you guys think? First off, how about that game? How about that shot? How about that finish? Thank you for staying. Obviously, we have an unbelievable panel to share their experiences and wisdom in what has been so worthy to talk about this week. The 50th anniversary of legislation that's so important. This league, these games, these individuals wouldn't be here without Title IX. My name is Lisa Byington. I am fortunate to be one of the voices of the Chicago Sky. Worked with the franchise since 2013. Very fortunate to have been able to play basketball in a basketball scholarship at Northwestern University and also play soccer as well. Thank you. And I come from a mother who did not have those opportunities. And we all have our own Title IX stories. And that's part of my past and present. Very fortunate now to not only play sports, but to have sports as a profession. Something that was unheard of for women many, many years ago. So before we introduce the panelists, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our partners who have helped make this panel discussion possible. Our Title IX game and panel discussion are presented by Crown Royal Regal Apple with support from Horizon Therapeutics and Marquee Sports Network, the new home this year to the WNBA champs, the Chicago Sky. We thank these new partners for their support of both the Sky and, of course, women's athletics as we look to advance the next 50 years of women's sports together. And so it is my pleasure now to introduce our four panelists, and we are going to start with the Chicago Mayor, Lori Lightfoot. Since 2019, Mayor Lori Lightfoot has served as the 56th mayor of the city of Chicago. And she's leading Chicago through an unprecedented time during a pandemic, undertaken an ambitious agenda of expanding opportunity and inclusive economic growth across several Chicago neighborhoods. She is a native of Massillon, Ohio, has been a resident of Chicago since 1986, and important for us here in this building, she is an avid Chicago Sky fan, been a season ticket holder for 17 years since year number one. And she didn't sit next to me, did you notice that? Oh, they made you sit there, okay. Next up, Margaret Stender. 2005, Margaret Stender became the first employee and founding president and CEO of the Chicago Sky, and still is a minority owner. Margaret launched the Sky Cares Foundation, the Chicago Sky Basketball Academy, a basketball and leadership developmental school for girls 8 through 18 years of age. Margaret also worked for 22 years in business in Chicago for companies like Quaker Oats, Rand McNally, Ameritech, and including president roles at Pepsi. She attended the University of Richmond, a 3-sport athlete, and co-captain of the basketball team. A women's basketball Hall of Famer is next, Doug Bruno. DePaul's Doug Bruno enters his 37th year coaching at his alma mater, has led the Blue Demons to 25 NCAA tournament appearances, including qualifying for the Big Dance 18 years in a row. And that includes the year 2020 that they qualified for, and there wasn't an NCAA tournament that year. A few weeks ago, the lifelong Chicagoan was inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. Of course, June 11th, Mayor Lightfoot and the city of Chicago named it Doug Bruno Day. Coach Bruno, of course, coached Allie Quigley at DePaul. and you can see him courtside at Chicago Sky games like he was here tonight. Chicago's hometown hero, Candace Parker. Naperville Central's finest, Tennessee royalty, WNBA legend, Chicago Sky player, one of the most decorated female basketball players to ever put on a uniform. High school national player of the year, college national champion, two-time WNBA champion. And I think this is really neat. A renowned broadcaster and producer of the documentary Title IX, 37 Words That Changed America by Baby Hair Productions. She's an influencer as long as she wants to play on the basketball court, but she is not done influencing when she gets done off the court, for sure. Where can we find the documentary, by the way?
Say that one more time.
Where can we find the documentary?
Yes, the documentary is replaying on NBA TV. It's going to be on TNT throughout the year, but it's Baby Hair Productions' first project, and it's something that was a passion project and something in the works for a very long time. So I hope you guys can check it out.
There's some teasers online too, some video teasers if you're curious what it's about. Okay, time to get things started. I mentioned our three sponsors. One of our newest sponsors, Crown Royal Regal Apple, wants to help us kick us off with the first question. Crown Apple has always sought to support the individuals and organizations pushing culture forward in the freshest ways. And it's pushing forward is where I want to focus on for our first question. I want all four panelists, just a quick thought. When you think 2022 and how Title IX has pushed things forward, is there an image or is there a word that comes to mind? Coach?
4 to 8% of all media coverage in the United States is of women's sports. And that's the image that comes to mind. If women are covered fairly by the mainstream media, together with the obvious social media, people will come watch women play sports.
I'd say the thing we need to, that I think of around Title IX in this year is participation. When I was in high school, 1 in 30 girls got a chance to play. 1 in 30. And now the numbers are 1 in 2.5. So we're almost half. So you have to so I think participation and then all the lessons and the values that come from that participation is really the watchword.
Well, for me, the image that comes to mind is that last series of games here at the end when the Sky clinched the finals. You know, we started out, I'm looking at this group right here, we're ride or die Sky fans. These folks have been season ticket holders with us from the very beginning. And you think about how that crowd grew and swelled. And what that says to me is if women are given an opportunity and people actually see the grace and the beauty of women performing at a high level, the crowd will come. And I'm glad to see that the crowd has stayed with the Sky this year. But give us an opportunity, give us a venue, make sure those sports are televised, and the Sky, pun intended, is the limit.
Well, just to piggyback off of what Mayor Lightfoot said, just in terms of opportunity, but also visibility, I think it goes beyond sports. I mean, we're seeing women in leadership positions. And I think we always talk about the impact it has on young girls, but it has just as great of impact on young boys as well. When it comes to hiring later on in life, when it comes to having a seat at the table, when it comes to being able to hire women and be okay with the way that they lead. And so I think just in terms of visibility and where we are, Title IX has provided a lot of opportunities for sports, but also just the business world as well, leadership, and the way that we view women as a whole.
We all have different backgrounds. We all grew up in different times, were affected by Title IX in different ways. And Candace, I'll throw it back at you. I watched a little bit of your teaser, of your documentary, and I think you said, I wrote down, you wrote a paper in the 8th grade, is that right? You wrote a paper in the 8th grade about Title IX, and it was the first time that you thought about what that kind of legislation had an impact on you. What were you learning as you were writing that paper that never really registered for a little Candace Parker growing up?
Well, the little Candace Parker was lucky because I grew up in Naperville, Illinois with 2 parents that encouraged me to be me, that told me that I deserved to walk into every single room as long as I worked hard at it. No matter if I was a female, a male, black, purple, white, green, whatever it is, if you deserve to walk in that room if you put the work in. And so for growing up, I was blown away when I stepped in the world and people thought I couldn't do something because I was a woman. And so when I entered 8th grade and I realized people were like, wow, you can dunk? And I was like, yeah, I mean, my brothers can, like I can, you know, in terms of things like that. And so I was very fortunate to have parents that pushed me and encouraged me and told me I can do and be anything. And then just to have that with, you know, Title IX included, and the growth of that, and all the pioneers that opened up the doors for me personally to be able to play for the Sky. You talk about the Billie Jean Kings, Lisa Leslie's, everyone up here. They opened the door for me, and I think everyone is doing their part to make sure that my daughter will have those same opportunities and more.
That encouraging word, that pat on the back, whether it comes from parents, whether it comes from mentors, is so important. I grew up in a household with a mom and a dad. My dad was my high school basketball coach. My mom was a teacher. And I was in elementary school, and I played soccer with the boys, and I was the only girl playing soccer. And I would come home, and mom and dad would say, Lisa, how was your day? How was school? And I'd say, I do this, this, and this. And at recess, I played soccer with the boys. And they would say, great. Were there any other girls playing? And I said, no. And they said, great. And so I grew up with that same attitude of, this isn't for girls, this isn't for boys. If it's for you and you want to do it, then that's great. And that kind of nod, that kind of pat on the back, that encouragement is so valuable. Keep that in mind for the people listening, if you can be that person to someone else. Mayor Lightfoot, I mentioned you grew up in Ohio. Football is kind of the emphasis there, right? And you know, I read somewhere that your stadium, I don't know if this is true, but the high school was like it was a very large football stadium and an emphasis there, right? And so tell us, as you, as a female growing up in kind of football central, what kind of resources and coaching you had growing up?
Very little. You know, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in a small town where high school football was everything. I didn't know what people did on Friday nights if they weren't at the game. And so women's sports were a complete afterthought. My high school basketball coach was one of the football coaches who just wanted to earn a little bit of coin, didn't really teach us much in the way of skills. But I think about so many women of my era who were fabulous athletes, but didn't get the shot because it just wasn't something that women did. And I look back on that time with regret. I mean, I wish I had a fraction of Candace's skill, but I look around and I think now back to my high school years, and there were so many incredibly gifted women athletes that just didn't get a shot because, you know, they grew up in a town like mine where there was one sport and it was a boys' sport, or there may have been other opportunities, but they weren't there for the women. So I think, thinking back now 50 years, because I was a kid when Title IX was passed, how much progress we've made is in that short period of time is pretty phenomenal. But we've got to make sure that we open up even more opportunities for women and girls, because, you know, again, you know this, playing sports and the camaraderie and teamwork, those are valuable life skills that no matter what you do afterwards, there's something of value that you can take with you anywhere in any environment. It makes such a difference when girls are basically told, as Candace was, there's no limit on your ability. It's just your desire and your hunger to be the best. And if that's the environment that we encourage women and girls to grow up in, we're going to see a lot more women leaders in non-traditional places, and that's a good thing, because when women lead, we all succeed.
Margaret Stender, you brought up a stat that, pre-Title IX, 1 in 30 girls played sports. You grew up in an all-girls school, and so you had the unique experience that you were actually that one in that stat. How did that shape you growing up?
Yeah, so, I was lucky because I went to an all-girls high school. So when you go to all-girls high school back in the 70s, we did everything. Right? We played all the sports. We had all the leadership roles. My experience was very similar to Candace's, only it was a shielded experience because it was all girls and all women. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized the world was nothing like my high school. It was a huge shock. I mean, I got to the gym and we had crummy facilities, no uniforms, no shoes. We supported ourselves. We transported ourselves. Those of you that have known me for a long time have heard of my red suede shoes story, which I can tell later, but it was a formative experience. If I could, Title IX is a piece of legislation that really worked. And as much as I am happy we're celebrating, I just have to say, I am really sad that we have the ERA and Roe v. Wade that have not worked. And so I want us to celebrate this, but I am so angry that I can't even participate more than 15 minutes without getting it out, and I'm sorry, okay? This legislation Title IX is an example of why it's important to vote for the people that care about people, not about their power. And we have got to be so vigilant, because as much as we're celebrating our progress today, we are going backwards, okay? And I'm sorry to be a downer, guys. I'm sorry, but I know I'm with a friendly crowd here, so.
Don't apologize. It's been a heck of a week to be a woman, because there's so many things to celebrate, and then all of a sudden we have reminders that we have still so far to go. So don't apologize for that.
It's just, doesn't it strike you guys as ironic that we are celebrating 50 years of Title IX, and at the same 2 days apart, our Supreme Court takes powers and rights away from women? Doesn't that strike everyone here as really ironic and odd? Okay, we just got to fight back.
Mayor Lightfoot, I know that you have opened up Illinois to be a safe haven for women who need abortions, and since you opened up the door, I think it's only proper for you to be able to comment about this.
Look, I am angry, I'm sad. It is devastating to think about. I went to bed on Thursday night feeling a sense of dread, but feeling like a whole person. And then by Friday morning, the Supreme Court had yanked our rights away from us, because this is such a bigger issue. And for me personally, it's a bigger issue than just reproductive health. Reproductive health is critical, and I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure Chicago remains that beacon, looking around us at what other states are gonna be doing. We've gotta make sure that Chicago still is a home that has a place for women who just want access for reproductive rights. But the thing that I'm also motivated by is that concurring opinion of Justice Thomas, when he's clearly signaling what the future could look like for all of us. The end of access to contraception, the end of protections for same-gender sexual relations among consenting adults, and for me, the end of same-sex marriage. I'm not gonna let that happen, and we've gotta fight like hell to make sure it doesn't. So while I mourn the loss, I also want people to be very focused and motivated. Voting matters. If people had voted the way they should have in 2016, we would not be sitting here today in the same way. There's no question. So we've got to make sure that we learn the lessons of history and that we don't repeat them. And the lesson for me is Get out there, fight for your rights, and don't let anyone ever tell you or try to demonstrate to you that you're worth less, that you're a second-class citizen, that you don't have the full rights of being an American guaranteed under our Constitution. I will not accept what the Supreme Court did on Friday. We can't.
Thank you. And though we sit here and the purpose of this panel discussion is to celebrate progress and Title IX, and we'll get back to that for sure. I think that was the elephant in the room, right? That we needed to get off our chest. I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did. There's still a ton of progress that needs to be made, for sure. Coach Bruno, you got to follow all that. The elder statesman, if you will, on this panel, grew up in Chicago, and most of your childhood was pre-Title IX. It came about when you were in college, is that right, around those years?
Yes.
Okay, so I love the fact Gender Allies is as important to this story as women supporting women. And so I love the fact that Coach Bruno is here with us as that male voice and the gender ally. As you're growing up and Title IX came about, what did you realize about the opportunities you were getting that women were not?
Before I answer, I don't want to walk away from standing with the women who just made the so right and beautiful statements that they made. So I am on everybody's side here. So I don't want to walk away from that. And I want people to understand that I definitely am for every single right that Mayor Lightfoot just so beautifully articulated. And I want to make sure everybody understands that. I will get back to the question. The question, growing up in the 60s, Illinois was a late state to allowing females to have opportunities to compete in sport. Women, girls didn't play sports when I was growing up on the south side of Chicago. None. I mean, you're talking zero. My senior year as a player at DePaul, our cheerleading coach, a physical education teacher, asked Coach Ray Meyer if she could put a mat in the corner of the gym and require our cheerleaders to compete in gymnastics. Coach Ray Meyer said yes. It's the first time I really started witnessing female athletes was in practice while the women were over in their corner executing gymnastics moves. So we didn't have anybody, you got to see nobody playing and competing in sports. When you grew up in all the beautiful neighborhoods of Chicago, there was not paid programming as today. You played on the streets, you played, and you just went out and played. And every neighborhood had 2, 3 young girls that would play with the boys. And it was a sociology of the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, those girls were labeled by we boys as tomboys. But all of a sudden, those tomboys were better than the boys. So you started picking these tomboys to be on your team because they were going to beat the boys. So that existed. But the opportunity for a girl in high school to have a team didn't exist. Title IX is 1972, and I want to thank the courageous women that fought the fight back then to make Title IX a reality. We're sitting here as beneficiaries of Title IX, but there were many brave women that made this happen. So now you graduate from college, you go off and coach high school boys for a couple of years. All of a sudden, you're asked to come back to be part of an athletic department as an assistant AD, 5 people in the department, and now there's girls' sports. And the AD one says, go coach the women's team. He didn't ask me, he says, go coach the women's team. Mayor Lightfoot just asked me, how did I get into this? I was told to go coach the women's team. I was on the floor for less than a week and a half to 2 weeks, and it just struck me right through the head that the spirit and competitiveness of an athlete, the head, the heart, and soul of an athlete has nothing to do with gender. And I felt so blessed as a young person to be taught that at such a young age. I walked back into the athletic director's office. I asked him, now that you have an extra duty for me, will I get some extra pay? And his response was, true coaches pay to coach. And I understand, he's right. True coaches that love coaching will do anything to have a team. But it was just pretty interesting, the concept. So that's how I got into women's coaching. Jeannie Lenti-Ponsetto was my captain of that first team, one of the best captains I've ever coached in all my, this will be my 49th year coaching, and this is one of the best ever. So it was just, I was blessed to be put into this world of females playing sports immediately after watching an era of no sports.
That's beautiful, Doug. That's beautiful.
It was hard to find female sports role models. You know, I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s, I'll date myself, but the only women's basketball that I could watch on TV is when the Final Four was on TV. And so I grew up in the state of Michigan, and my first sports hero were men's basketball players, because that's what I saw. I remember Jennifer Azzi playing for Stanford, and I thought, oh, wow. Like, look, I was a point guard, look at her, you know? And it just registered for me, that's a woman playing on TV and playing sports. Mayor Lightfoot, do you remember a similar moment, maybe a first time that you watched a female who you admired playing sports, and who and when was it?
I grew up being a huge track fan as well, and Evelyn Ashford, the sprinter, because I desperately wanted to be a next level sprinter. So I remember watching those women in the Olympics and thinking, this is so amazing. Again, my juvenile brain didn't calculate much more than that, but seeing these women who are just phenomenal, breaking records, it was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. And truth be told, I saw this one play when she was in high school. My wife and I went to a winter tournament, and we're like, yeah, that's that Candace Parker girl. We'd heard about her. And then to see her play, I mean, she was just cutting through the crowd. I'm like, there's nobody in a court like her. So, you know, you remember those moments and you treasure them. But there were a fair number when I was coming up. And yeah, I remember with the first wave of the Women's Olympians, that's really where the magic clicked in. The basketball players, the volleyball players, and of course the track players, pretty phenomenal. And it was the first time in the 80s where you really saw some national embrace of women's sports, because I hadn't seen it before. But those women, those early kind of pioneers that got the opportunity, they were phenomenal. And most of them are in the Hall of Fame now.
Pass the mic over to this one. Candace, not only obviously do people, the mayor of Chicago watched you in high school, you have the unique opportunity. I believe your college decision was even televised, right? Is that right? So you go from, you know, not having access to, you know, for women to play sports, to women not being on TV, to now suddenly this superstar, this high school stud making her college announcement on television. When you hear these stories, you process, and you do your history, I know that. How do you process how lucky you are, first of all, to grow up in the time that you did, and then the responsibility and impact you have for all those eyeballs who are now watching you?
Well, first, thank you. It means a lot. I always feel the love, and that's why I'm sitting here today, is because I always feel the love in Chicago and being from Naperville. It supported and really embraced women's sports and women's basketball, and I'm grateful for the impact it had, from soccer, YBA, to volleyball, club volleyball. There was always an activity for young girls to participate. For me personally, I feel very blessed for those that came before me. I mean, I remember my dad used to sit down and show me Cheryl Miller, right at USC.
That was your person you watched?
She was before her time. And I say that in the sense of Cheryl Miller would be sitting here. She would have had a long WNBA career. She would have made, you know, the trip overseas and dominated overseas. Cheryl Miller, a generation before, would be this. It would be on the lips of everybody. Everybody would know who Cheryl Miller was. And I think it's those individuals that I saw, even Cynthia Cooper later in her career in the WNBA. I mean, she was in her mid-30s, winning back-to-back MVPs, raising the roof. And I think what I got from all of that, I feel very blessed and very lucky. But what I got from watching those role models, I think it was that I didn't have to shrink myself, that I could be who I want to be and who I can be. And I think young ladies and young women are growing up and being themselves, and they're not being who they're told to be. I just remember, like, in school, it was like, yes, I'm very expressive. If you guys watch my facial expressions on the court, very expressive, right?
Really? Expressive only when the whistle's
Growing up
blown.
as a girl, that was not always the best thing, right? Like, my expression was not always encouraged. I got a tech tonight. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. That wasn't always, the greatest thing. But at the same time, I feel like now, because of the opportunities that we've had, because we have young ladies announcing their decision on television, we have young ladies performing on television, raising the roof, showing emotion. Now other young girls are saying, like, I can do that.
And it's okay to do that.
And it's okay to do that. And so for a very long time, it was, we didn't have that publicity. We didn't have that visibility. And now we're seeing kids in college now there's stats with social media. That's what I think is so interesting. They say women's sports don't sell, right? Well, if you look at the top Instagram people in college, they're both female athletes. They killed the men's side. So I just think that now there's numbers, and with that comes a lot of responsibility of sponsors. I mean, our jerseys should be up for sale after we win a championship. There's certain things like that like we have to help women's basketball be successful, and we can't just say that it won't. And so because of having the opportunity to announce my decision on ESPN, having the opportunity to play in the McDonald's All-American game on television, having the opportunity to have, a college where I go to and I play in front of 24, 25,000 people, I think it puts women on a platform, and it shows that we can succeed, and that if given the opportunity, that we can sell, and visibility is so important.
That people care, that people will cheer, and people will buy, and people will pay attention. That wasn't always the case. There wasn't always, Margaret Stender, a WNBA team here in Chicago. There wasn't always a WNBA team here in Chicago.
The longtime season ticket holders know that
Yeah,
there
how
was
about
not
a show of
always
hands
a WNBA.
of the longtime season ticket holders?
They're right up there. All of you see
Thank
them, all these
Thank
staying
you
right here.
for your awesome support, loyalty, and it led to a championship. Margaret, what was important to lay as the foundation? I'm going to give you kind of the ownership mic, if you will.
Oh my gosh,
to
Michael's
shoulder
not
that
here. That's a lot of responsibility.
As a first employee, a minority owner, what was important to put a team in Chicago and to keep a team in Chicago in the mid-2000s?
Yeah. So that's a wonderful question, and I would want to start by just thanking the Alter family and the owners for just making it happen and for sticking with it. It's been a long journey, okay? But you know what? We always did it from a position of values, right? Doing it the right way, and trying to treat our fans with kindness and respect, and trying to treat our players and our coaches with that same kindness and respect. And I think that that's proven in the long run to bring us a championship team. You can see it in the way that this team plays. The respect that they have and the joy that they play with, it's infectious, right, fans? I mean, it's just, you just love to watch them.
And we like blowing leads and giving you all entertainment, right? You like doing that too. We like the entertainment aspect.
No, but you know, I would say one of the biggest frustrations in the early days, if I could, was with the media. The media.
The media.
The media, okay? Michael and I would go, and I'm sorry if I'll start with the newspapers, but the Trib and the Sun-Times, we would go to the editorial boards and we'd say, bringing a WNBA team to Chicago, we'd like a beat reporter. No. Well, We need to build visibility. We need the city to see that their team is here. No. And this has been the most frustrating thing, and this is the thing that we have to continue to build and to build and to build. I kept saying, how will we ever grow if no one ever hears about us? And they said, well, when you get bigger, we'll cover you. Okay, see, this makes no sense. Okay, and it's because they're looking through a lens of the male sport model. This is a very traditional sports town. We cover football. Have you guys looked at the baseball pages in the Sun-Times? Excuse me, Sun-Times lovers, but there's like 6 pages of baseball. Do you know the attendance at baseball has been declining for 15 years? Okay, so I'm sorry to the baseball fans, but we're stuck in this. This is the way we cover sports. And I would really love us, as we think about the next 50 years, to stop comparing the women's game, all of them, to the men's game, okay? When we first started, one of the things people would ask me is, well, you know, the WNBA would get more fans if they'd lower the rim. This is like what my biggest pet peeve. We would get more fans if they would extend the game to 48 minutes. And they would see that the women score more points than the men. That's what they need to do. So the challenge is to change the model, right? Change the comparison, because the comparison is irrelevant. These are extraordinary athletes that play a beautiful game, and we don't need to compare it to the men's game. We need to change the paradigm.
Well, I'll just say this. Margaret's much more polite than I am. We got to put women in those key decisions. Roles. If women were the decision makers about who got assigned, there would be more coverage. I'm looking at the one beat reporter who's hiding. It doesn't make any sense given the way in which this team has completely galvanized our city and the way that they're succeeding. So women have to be the decision makers at the media companies, and frankly, women have to be the decision makers in sports teams as well. Because if they were, and they were the sponsors who made the decisions, it would completely change the landscape. So the next frontier is putting women in charge. That's what we've got to do. That's when we will make even bigger strides and more progress.
2014, the Chicago Sky. First of all, I would like to thank the Alter family, Margaret, and the entire Sky organization for bringing this program, this team to Chicago from the ground up. And those that have been watching from the ground up, it's just been a joy to watch. Again, Mayor Lightfoot said it best. I mean, I had tears in my eyes a year ago. Not just, we want championships here, but it wasn't just the championship. It was a joy of having watched the Chicago Hustle back with the WBL in 79 and 80 try to make this happen. And just watching, you know, you dream of and vision of this place filled for women's sports. And when we came back from those 13 points down and that third, fourth quarter and just won that basketball game, but to see this place filled, it was just unbelievable. But 2014, Sky played for a championship. And I'm writing the editors of both papers personally, because it just was so offensive that the Sox were stinking that year, the Cubs were stinking that year, and Bears coverage was getting more for their training camp. And it was just so upsetting to watch them not be covered. I was invited into the boardroom. The Sun-Times brought me down into the big guys room, and it was, again, big guys room. It was a big guys room, which is what Mayor Lightfoot was just talking about. And they loved to say what Margaret just said. If more people would go to the games, we'd cover them more. Well, the Chicago Bulls came here in '66. I'm old enough to remember. The Chicago Bulls weren't very good. The Chicago Bulls had 4 beat writers when the stadium was as filled as it is right now to watch the Chicago Bulls play in the amphitheater. And they had 4 beat writers. So the Bulls were covered long before Michael got here. So again, this media situation is a situation where women need to be covered, and they need to be covered much more than 4 to 8%, which is what's going on here, in order for people to come out and watch these absolutely great athletes play basketball. And before I give it back, Candace, love your team this year. I mean, I'm a coach, and it was great to see the shot go in tonight, but there were five beautiful plays tonight that were just beautiful basketball. Unfortunately, they all ended with missed layups tonight, or we'd have been up 10 at the end. But just the beauty of this team, the beauty of this game, this is just a very, very joyful team to watch this year, and I know that we're just starting to take off here.
When we first started, the thing that was so interesting, and you talked about it, Mayor, is that no one had any idea how gifted you all really are. And I would say to people, I would tell stories. I would, please come to a game. If you come to a game, you'll see. And the number one thing people would always say to me after their first Sky game, same thing, it was the same thing every time. I had no idea. They just need to see it on TV or on social media or in person, because they have no idea.
Candace, to that point, how do you sell this league to someone who doesn't care? Yeah, who doesn't care, who say the women can't play as well as the men. What's your counter? What has been your counter to that?
Well, first, going back to what Margaret said, I think it's the comparison that's the problem. I think for a long time the WNBA struggled with their target market, and I think now we finally have it right, where we know who we're marketing to. For a long time we said things about our game that were targeted towards haters to get them to come and like it. Well, if you don't there's some people that don't like hockey, that don't like baseball, that they're not gonna like, you know what I mean? And so once you find your target audience and you're able to market to them, I think that's what's important. And for me, I'm with you, the experience. This isn't corporate. This is a fun atmosphere. This is something where you come, you have a good time, you're participating with the Jumbotron, with the DJ, you're gonna meet the players, and I feel like also in terms of storylines, what the NBA has done so well, and I know I said no comparison, but you're able to see their faces, you're able to follow their stories through social media, through when they're coming up, and I think now with the WNBA, you're able to do that same thing. You're able to follow the storylines of that we are more than just basketball players. I'm a mom, two beautiful children that I love very much. There's a lot of people that have other talents that are outside of the game. And also we're a league that has always been at the forefront of change. And I think that in 2020, it opened up a lot of people's eyes that the WNBA has always been here. We've always been in the front line. We've always spoke up for what was right. Because we are a majority of a minority in this country. And I say that in the sense of we are women. A lot of us are African American. We come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Gender, identification, I mean, you talk about sexuality down the line. And so for us, we aren't a voice for the voiceless because we hear it's this country that doesn't listen to voices. They're speaking. It's that we don't listen. It's our job to amplify those voices and to make sure that they're heard. And so I think by coming here and doing this, you see what we love to do, but also you see the people that are behind it. And I think that, we've always been authentic in who we are, and it shows on the court, but it also shows off the court.
Speaking of amplifying voices, Mayor Lightfoot, I want to go back to you, and in terms of finding your voice, you said, one of the solutions is to putting women in these leadership positions. Some of us don't have that DNA. Some of us are uncomfortable hearing our own voice. I know one of my favorite stories about your background is in high school, you were class president, and you hated the food, right, at the cafeteria, and so you spoke out. And you got better pizza, right? And that was just kind of the building, a foundation of your leadership skills, and just a silly example, but an example of finding your voice and not caring what people thought. There are people here, there are little girls in here, and there are adults, men and women, who struggle to find their voice. So how do you find it and become a leader when you're not comfortable with it?
Well, I think everybody's got to feel and really where they are and use their comfort level. But there's opportunities every single day in your life where you can stand up and assert yourself. You know, you may not be, you know, a loudmouth like me, where I feel comfortable being at the front of the parade, but there are ways in which you can claim your spot, not let people disrespect you, and just assert yourself and not be passive or complicit or silent. And that's, I think, what I'm talking about. But look, there are plenty of people who do want to lead, who really want to be at the forefront, and circumstances have held them back. I think about so many women who have been denied leadership positions in almost every institution that I can think of, because the paradigm is a man's paradigm. So I spent a lot of time in big corporate law, and we struggled constantly to make sure that we were recruiting and retaining talent. And at some point, the light bulb went on for me. The reason is because we were opening up the door for women to walk through, but into institutions made by and for men. So we have to have institutions that reflect our lived experience, reflect the fact that most women are going to be, at some point in their life, the primary caretaker for their children. So we've got to create institutions that reflect our reality instead of just walking through the door of an organization created by and for men. Now, we're not there yet, and there's a lot more steps in our journey, but we've got to recognize it is not a level playing field. We have different needs and sensibilities, and so we've got to create our own institutions. And that's, I think, picking up on what Candace just said. What we really, really saw, particularly in 2020, is how the women of the WNBA are leading. You know, we saw the players really step up and say, we need something different. We don't need a template derived from the men's game. We need our own template. We need our own voice. We need to make sure we're reflecting what our players' experience is, which is very, very different than what the men's experience is. And I think the WNBA is listening. I think we've got some more steps to go, and we need our folks to get those charter planes, but that's a whole different issue. But when women are organized and asserting themselves, they're going to lead in a way that's very different than men, and they're going to create organizations and institutions that are very different. And that's what I'm talking about. So, no, not everybody's going to feel comfortable, you know, being the rabble-rouser, being at the front of the line. But the women who are create the opportunity for those other women to be there and be those spaces and feel more comfortable and more authentic. And that's what we need.
Coach Bruno, you have we're talking about voices. You have a male voice, you know, to lead young women, and you have. That wasn't always the case. You coached men at Loyola, right, for several years before you decided to take the job at DePaul.
Women first, then men, back to women.
Right, but you took the DePaul job to coach women, and I'm curious, as a man leading women, or as a male voice trying to empower women, what have been the challenges and what have been the successes in that kind of role?
My job is the development of female leadership. That's my job. And yes, the job is to get Candace to say yes to us instead of Tennessee when she was on TV. but my real job is to develop female leadership. So now that you are moved into that position, and everything that Mayor Lightfoot just articulated about walking through doors, you're trying to get your women to understand that they are living in a man's world, and it's not because it's right that it's a man's world, it's because you study any religion that exists, and males dominate and mistreat their women, and every religion. So once you are put and thrust onto the other side, I'm never not going to not be a man. I'm always going to be a man. At the same time, I'm in a position where I am blessed to be able to have to view and learn to view what it is like. I can't be a woman, but I can still see what our women are up against every single day, from just the littlest things and littlest details. And again, Lori, I'm becoming familiar with you.
We've known each other a long time. You can call me Lori.
So we're sitting here. But to get your woman to understand that you have to fight, you have to know how to fight, you have to pick your fights. Candace again said it, the majority, we're the minority, we're the majority minority. And so it's a process that goes on every single day, and you just work to teach your female athletes how to fight. And again, I think it's important for me to be a voice as a male, and that puts me in a position where I get into, I don't care. I mean, I stand up to our guys and say, how can you get mad at me? They get mad at me because you're a guy. How come you're not pushing for more men in coaching women? And I say, I'm not giving my job back, but if my job is to develop female leadership, and if my job is to, that means my job is to have females in positions that we have. So I don't understand what you don't understand about the fact that this is the way this should work. Women don't get to coach men. Men get to coach women and men. So that's why I don't argue or fight because I'm a man over something that is logically correct and right. And that there's rightness here. That's what so many men, when I got thrust into coaching women, thrown, told, I told Mayor Lightfoot earlier today, I was blessed to be able to have a light bulb go on at an age of about 26, 27 years old, that yes, I was aware of racial discrimination in this country, but I wasn't aware of gender discrimination in this country. And I'm being thrust into both kinds of discriminations on a daily basis. Your job is to fight, and your job is to be a voice to change this as we move forward.
But I do want to say this. All of these leaders up here are putting their money where their mouth is. And I say that in the sense of ownership. I say that in the sense of season ticket holder from the beginning. Every single time I've played in Chicago, I've looked to the left and I've seen Coach Bruno sitting in those seats. From my very first game, I played against the Chicago Sky and on. And so I think everybody in here, yes, we are allies. We are a part of the process. But a lot of it is also investing your money in what you believe in and the power in visibility in women's sports. My daughter called me out. She did. I said, yeah, we're investing, people need to invest in women's sports. Are we? Okay. So now we have to go out and, now we're a part of the Angel City FC ownership group, my daughter and myself. So I think that in terms of season ticket holders, in terms of going to games, that's got to be a priority for others because, obviously, Doug Bruno's coaching in college, and what do your young ladies aspire to do? To play in the WNBA. And if they play for a coach that doesn't support the WNBA, then what? And so I think it is a process, and it's everybody doing their part to make this better and make it better for everybody. And it is the young dads taking your kids to go to the AAU tournaments, but it's also buying tickets on a Sunday to go and see Chicago Sky versus the Indiana Fever. So I think it's very important to do that. Yeah, all of us.
I love the fighting of the mic. I wondered how long it would take.
I do want you to know I bought those tickets until you got our locker room, and then I traded for them. Michael said, we need your locker room. And I said, Michael, how badly do you want them? So thank you for...
Can I just make one other suggestion? I think Candace has hit on an important topic about know where you're spending your money, okay? And I think if I could add to that, if you don't feel like jumping to the front of the line, okay, just educate yourselves on the intersectionality between gender, okay, and income and race. And really study how those things are interconnected and how you can put your money and your people power into driving change in these systemic and structural things that are aligned against gender, race, and income, right? They're connected. They're connected. And you can make, even if you don't want to be a peer, study it and then and then put your people power behind it.
You have to be intentional. Yep, that deserves a well-deserved hand. To your point, Candace, if you can grab the mic again, you have to be intentional. I was watching the first night of coverage of the NCAA men's tournament, and it was the first four coverage, and you made a point of carving out some time during the studio show to say, hey, I filled out my women's NCAA tournament bracket. Have you guys on this set done it? And it's important to do. And it didn't seem to me like it was totally off the cuff. It could have come in a production meeting, but that seemed like you're using your platform in what some people might say in a small, subtle way, but it's not. And you're being intentional with the stage and the platform that you had in that kind of example.
Well, I wish we had more time to discuss the ins and outs of the NCAA, but we do not. I'll spare the evening. But I just feel as though a lot of pushback that I got from individuals when filling out brackets was like, I don't know the teams. But then I look at the brackets and I'm like, do you know Southwest Missouri State on the men's side?
On the men's
you have them
side,
going
right.
all
They
the way
don't.
to the Final
The
Four.
answer is no.
No, honestly. The people in our group, in our pool, that filled out NCAA brackets for the men's side, never watched basketball. They won our pool. Never watched basketball. So that's not an excuse. And I think in terms of we don't understand the value of filling out the brackets because of the visibility, because of the sponsorship behind it. Because when you fall in love with that, you usually watch the game because you have something at stake. You filled out a bracket. And I think it's just as important. And obviously there was a push ever since the bubble season and Sedona's post about the inequities in between the NCAA. I mean, for gosh sakes, we just got to start using March Madness. I didn't even know that, So I think that there's definitely a push, and we talk about the visibility. But can you imagine if on the ESPN bracket you were able to have millions of people filling out a bracket, and you're filling out with a chance to win? So why wouldn't you? But it's just that they have this misconception that, I don't know women's sports. And you don't know men's sports either. You don't know all the 64 or 68 teams that are in the NCAA tournament. So that was a push, and I made sure that everybody at our work filled out. I lost the bracket. I actually picked South Carolina, but I lost the bracket.
I was gonna say, I know you picked the
It actually
winner.
was a great point, though, because I lost it, and I probably watched the most women's basketball at our office.
Right,
so
and
it was
the person
a point.
that picked the mascot and the favorite color.
It was the point. I think our statistician actually won the bracket, and she doesn't watch basketball, period. So proof that you should fill out your women's brackets.
Well, we will wrap up with a couple of fan questions and that had been submitted before, and a chance maybe for each panelist, Cliff Notes version maybe, to answer these questions. So the first one is, while Title IX has many positives, if we explore it through a continuous improvement or learning lens, what things can we do to strengthen Title IX and further unlock our future? Whoever wants to jump at that one.
Going to the coach.
Wow. No, the mindset, the mindset that there's still a mindset that opportunities for women are taking opportunities from men. I mean, it drives me absolutely crazy to have to listen to uneducated males, which might be everybody sorry guys, but they just really just believe that, that women's sports are taking opportunities from men's sports. I mean, that's something that has to change. And again, I think we've talked it pretty well through. I mean, where can we go with Title IX? The fight is never over. I think that's the thing that everybody has to understand. It's not over. You have to walk into work every day to do your job. Roll up your sleeves and just do your job. But your antennas always have to be up. And you can't do your job when you're working with the underrepresented group. You can't do your job without having your antennas up and your boxing gloves closed, ready to fight because there's something there almost on a daily basis. And that's just really how I look at it. You just have to stay focused on your job, stay in a moment, but be ready to box if you have to.
Anybody else?
I'm gonna endorse what Coach said. There have been too many athletic directors who have weaponized Title IX against women. And by that, you've seen they haven't done their job, revenues are down, the university president doesn't want to support athletics, and then what do they say? Oh, we've got to cut more men's programs because of Title IX. That's a terrible thing. It's totally false, but it's happening still every single day. The other thing I would say is this: you can have laws on the book, but as Coach said, if you don't have the mindset and of the people who are the decision makers to really breathe reality and equity into those laws, everything is lost. 2 years ago, and I will take on the NCAA every single day, 2 years ago, we saw at the women's tournament the deplorable conditions that the women's teams were laboring under compared to the palatial resources that were available for the men. How does that happen this late in, right? 40-something years after Title IX. So you've got to make sure that the law has real resonance because people are living the values that the law was intended. Having a law in the book without people saying, yes, this is what this means, this is what equity looks like, is meaningless. So we've still got some road to travel. Again, I'm excited of the 50 years and the remarkable progress, but we see tangible, concrete actions every single day that are working against the heart of what Title IX means, which is true equity, true opportunity for women at all levels, and we've got to fight like hell to make sure we don't take steps back.
And so, but just in the last 10 years, watch Candace, Candace,
right,
and her national teammates schlepping their luggage through 2 to 3 miles of a foreign airport, schlepping everybody with big baskets like you're at a grocery store moving their equipment. And I'm just sitting there thinking, yeah, that's Kobe and LeBron up there flying on their way. And you're talking a national team in the last 10 years. You're not talking something, the person sitting here that was doing the schlepping.
A final fan question. We'll leave it for Margaret and Candace. You guys can handle this one. You talked about buying tickets, some simple things. The question is, how do we, the public, regular people, get involved to help Title IX into this next level in any way we can? How can we put a period on the everyday folks that want to help, they just don't know how?
I mean, I think we've shared a lot of those ideas. Be intentional. Don't support things that don't support your local team, right? Ask for more media coverage. Write the editors of the newspaper. Be vocal about wearing Sky gear and encouraging people to come. Just be part of the team. I think it's intentionality. I think it's really keeping it top of mind. And to Coach Bruno's point, you'll see inequities all the time. If you open your mind and study and see and educate yourself, you'll see lots of inequities. And one of the things I hope will change is that Candace won't feel lucky that she's here. She's supposed to be here. She worked her tail off to be here. And I want that past of feeling lucky. She made this happen. I have a basketball school for girls. We now are called Sky Basketball Academy, and I have 150 girls in the club. And one of the things I say to them is the GOATs were not born that way. So if they can do it, you can do it too. And it's the same for all of us. We just need to keep being intentional.
And to piggyback off of what she said, in being intentional, I think, just our system is very reactive and not proactive. And I think from the grassroots level, which Title IX covers grassroots, covers all the way up to college, we focus on college a lot, but it's the mindset of our young girls. Like, there were probably several members of my team that were broken when we were given the hand-me-downs of boys' uniforms, even though we were undefeated, and they got the brand new uniforms. So I think it's the mindset from a grassroots level of that you are less than because you are a girl, and I think a lot of us have the power to change that. And I say that in the sense of, in the documentary, we have someone that is a softball mom, and they were willing to pay for a brand new softball field. And the high school wouldn't allow it, but they had just replaced the baseball's entire field, turf, whatever, scoreboard, and all of that. And she took action and made a change. And I think that, yes, they got a brand new field, but that told those girls that they were worth it, that they were worth that fight, that they were this, that they were not less than their male counterparts. And I think from all levels, if we can do our part to continue to uplift and to continue value differences, because obviously diversity in thought, differences is what makes our country great and what makes leadership great, which makes teamwork great. And I think that that is where, we really kind of cross over, is all of those things we've all talked about, but also the mindset. Because my daughter I refuse to allow her to think that she's less than.
A lot to chew on, and hopefully more promise and progress in 50 more years. Thank you so much for staying, for listening, for coming out. Thank you to our 4 panelists, Candace Parker, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, Margaret Stender, and Coach Doug Bruno. Of course, our sponsors, again, Crown Royal Regal Apple, Horizon Therapeutics, and Marquee Sports Network for airing such an important conversation. Thank you, everyone.